So Kim, it's been a minute since we recorded the
Yes.
video, but Kim had a really great idea, and you've been trying to get me to watch Sleepaway Camp for a few months now. Like it's been a
Oh, probably
while,
longer than that. I feel like
maybe longer than that.
yes.
And it is, having watched it now, a very entertaining, that's the word I'll use, a very entertaining summer horror film.
Yes.
So it's appropriate for the time that we're in now here, like late
Because
July,
all the kids
turning
are
toward
at
August.
sleepaway camp, hopefully
Right.
not being murdered.
I'm like, is that so? And I'm very much removed from like camp terminology, but is that the term they use, sleepaway? Like I just called it a summer camp when I was a kid. Like I don't
No, we
know
call
if
it sleepaway camp. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you go to a sleepaway camp when you were younger?
I did like one time, and I didn't like it very much. And I do remember, actually, I'm trying to somewhat write a short play about it. I applied for a commission to write a short horror play. And it basically, like, I remember being at camp and they were like telling ghost stories around the campfire, and there was like a
Yeah.
legend about the camp and like this monster, and we had let slip to someone that they were telling us this story, and then they got in trouble, and so they had to change the story to make it funny so that we weren't freaked out.
They got in trouble for telling a monster story or a ghost story. That's what it was.
Yeah, because I was young. I mean, I was in middle school. Like I wasn't in high school or anything.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I did once.
When I was, I don't know, maybe like 6th grade, something like that.
Yeah, I was probably that old.
I went to camp one summer. It was Camp Don Lee. I don't know if anybody watching this knows where Camp Don Lee is. It's in North Carolina, but it's basically like a small camp that's like a sailing camp, like learning how to use a sailboat and that kind of stuff. And it was cool. You know, it was good.
Mine was a church camp.
It was a church camp. It was like a Methodist.
Yeah. So mine was a Methodist church camp.
Yeah. So it was fine, you know, but so the events of Sleepaway Camp. So first of all, I guess before are we going to try to walk through the whole plot? I mean, is that what we want to do?
Is there one?
There kind of is one, I guess. And actually, you know, now that I'm saying that, I need to pull up IMDb because I know that I'm not going to remember the character's name. So let me just do that really quickly.
You got Angela and Ricky.
Yep. So let me ask you before we jump into this, I guess fully. Overall, do you like this movie? Like, would you say that this is a good horror movie?
Well, what does good mean?
It's very subjective. Yes.
It's very subjective. When I think about my personal horror canon, Sleepaway Camp is in there. Like,
okay.
I watch that movie, I wouldn't say once a year, but probably every few years. I'm like, oh, I haven't watched Sleepaway Camp in a while. I should watch that again. Like, I own it on DVD. I do like that movie. I think if you're a horror fan, I think you need to watch it because it did become sort of a horror culture icon.
It's a cult classic. I think it's fair to call it. At least, and again, you know, I've always been kind of like tangentially familiar with it, even though I hadn't seen it until just a few days ago. So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this. It came out in 1983, so I was 1 year old. I was very, very young when this came out. And I would say that this is like the epitome of like camp. And there's kind of a pun being used there because it's about a camp. But it is like campy to the max, like intentional or not, which I would hope that it was intentional, that it's kind of like what it is. But I don't know, maybe not. Like it's got to be one of the campiest movies I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of campy movies before. Just kind of tongue-in-cheek, that sort of thing.
It's interesting because there are sequels, and I've seen at least one of them.
Okay.
And they really lean into the camp in those.
Okay.
I don't know what was going on in 1983. I was not alive yet. And so and having seen the movie when I was very young, it did not feel campy to me the first time I saw it, and we'll get into the trauma later. But now I think as an adult, and that's why it's so interesting to hear your opinion if I were to just watch, like, I'm pretty sure I had Matt watch it in early years of our relationship. And I'm sure he probably has the same idea. Like, this is ridiculous. But as a kid, it was not a ridiculous movie. Like, it was quite disturbing for me as a child to watch this movie.
Well, and I guess without spoiling it quite yet, I mean, to me, the only thing that really makes this movie stand out is the ending. Like, I mean, as far as like, you know, it being like, whoa, like that really came out of left field sort of thing.
I do love the death scenes, honestly. When I think about death scenes and using the environment and being unique and disturbing, I think this movie does a really good job.
It's creative. I think the thing that I found, so I was watching it and I could not stop laughing. Like I was watching this, and it could have been because it was late at night. I was tired, but it felt like an escalating level of insanity to a certain extent. To like, and what I mean by that is like the characters. It's like each character is increasingly more absurd and ridiculous than the other character. Like, and I totally get that, kids can be mean. Like they can be mean and cruel and all that, but like they are comically mean in this. Like, I mean, just some of the things that they say to one another and stuff. It's like, maybe I'm just lucky in that I never encountered much of that as a kid, but they just seem over the top mean to the point of like, what is this? Like, what is going on here? But I don't know. Do you agree with that?
It wasn't over the top, but maybe I did experience and / cause some of that meanness in my life. So,
yeah.
So I
can
see myself saying
felt,
some of those things to people.
It felt truer to you, I guess, than it did to me, potentially.
It did, but it was still ridiculous. I mean, when we talk about what they're saying, I would say it falls within the realm of the genre, like especially for that time.
Well, and I kind of want to put it in context, right? So it came out in 1983. When did Friday the 13th come out? Was that like 1980, maybe?
I feel like it had to have been before that.
Yes. Okay. So Friday the 13th was 1980. And so
Halloween. This was probably an attempt. And I feel like I must have read or seen something somewhere about this. But I feel like it was probably like, let's do another, we're at a camp and people are getting killed movie, but we'll give it a really interesting take.
That is exactly my thinking here. Like, I think that they weren't necessarily 100% trying to recreate Friday the 13th, but I think they were trying to capitalize as a success on that as a genre and as an idea, but also trying to make it a little more different and distinctive where they could, maybe.
Yeah. Because Halloween has it has the mysterious killer. Like, you don't know who it is.
Right. It has the mysterious killer.
Yeah.
And Halloween came out in 78. So, I mean, I don't really see a connection between Halloween and this. I think those are very different types of movies.
Yeah, no, I mean, in Halloween, you know who it is. Like, I feel like that's one of the biggest distinctions between, as I write horror movies, like that, do we know who the killer is? Yes or no? And then that really, I think, dictates a lot of the story and the action and stuff like that.
So the first time you saw it, which I know it's been a long time ago for you, but did you think you knew who the killer was?
I'm sure I didn't. I didn't. Because
so the whole time I watched this, I thought I knew who the killer was, even though I thought they were trying to throw me off the trail of who that person was. And I was right, except I wasn't right because of the ending. I guess, sort of, if that makes sense.
What? so who did you think it was?
I thought it was Angela.
Okay.
The main, isn't that her name? Angela?
Yeah, that's Angela. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Well, because everybody who dies has interacted with her in a negative way, and then they die.
Well, but I thought that they were doing that to try and make you think it was her. But then, so initially I thought, okay, they're trying to make me think it's her, but it's somebody else. But then my thinking was, no, it probably is her. They're just trying to do some kind of like crazy mind game with the audience.
And because the camp leader guy, the old guy who's hooking up with the young girl, apparently.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Like, what in the world?
It was the 80s, Chris. I don't know. And but then he starts thinking it's her cousin Ricky because he's aggressive and he defends her. So I do think they try to throw you a little bit like, well, maybe it is him, or is it just some random person who's stalking the camp,
Right. And then, I mean, so, backtracking a little bit, like, and thinking about some of these characters, you've got the cook, who is like one of the creepiest characters, like, ever.
Because he's because he's a pedophile. Yes.
Yeah, he's a pedophile. Like, I mean, it's just like, what, like, I was watching it expecting it to be just kind of like, which it is comedic, super lowbrow, which it kind of is that too. But then that scene happens in the refrigerator in the kitchen. And I was like, whoa, like, where is this going? Like, what is happening here? And then, of course, like, it ended up not being, I was like, please don't let this happen. It ended up being something else. But
it's enough to spark, he needs to die.
Right. And I mean, I will say he did have a good death. I mean, it was, I don't know that I've ever
that traumatized me from boiling water for most of my life. I'm like, nope.
Well, and I will say, like, from a practical effects perspective, like when he is laying there on the floor of the kitchen, having had a gigantic, like 5-gallon pot of boiling water poured on him, you can see the blisters like pulsating and things. That was kind of
Yeah.
awesome. Like from a
Yes.
horror gore fan perspective, like I totally appreciated that.
Yes.
Oh, and something I caught, and I don't know if you. So when did you watch this recently? Like, has it been in the past like few weeks or months?
Yeah,
or
no, I
anything?
just watched it this weekend or one of those days.
Did any of the characters that were working in the kitchen look familiar to you? I'm just curious because I saw
No.
this character and was like, this person looks and sounds super familiar. Did anybody jump out to you?
No.
So the guy who kind of takes over as like the head cook,
Yeah.
that's James Earl Jones's dad.
So I saw the names in the credits. And
yeah,
it's something Earl Jones. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. I'm like, no way that like they would be related, right? And I guess they were. Okay.
yeah. Well, he started talking, and I was like, man, he sounds like Darth Vader. It sounds just like Darth Vader. And he had like kind of his face. And then I went to Wikipedia and was like, totally, that's his dad. Like, I guess he was a stage actor and then did some movies, and that's how James Earl Jones got involved with it. And so, yeah, that was kind of cool. It was a random little connection there. But
Awesome.
so yeah, that happens. And it's interesting how they start the movie, right? They basically start the movie by showing you the camp in sort of a ruined state, like I guess being sold off, like I guess presumably after the events of the film, right?
Well, see, and I like when they're doing their little sailing thing in the beginning.
Oh, right, that part too.
They talk about wanting to go to the camp. So I interpreted the opening credits to be sort of not a precursor, but an after. Like, this is what the camp looks like after the movie, because and they have
that's
like
what I meant. If I didn't say that well, that's what I meant.
Okay, yes, it's in ruins
Yeah.
because yes, things have happened that we haven't seen yet.
And I guess we should talk about the introduction because that obviously factors hugely into the plot and sort of everything else.
Yes.
So it's basically a dad and his two kids on a sailboat, and there's I guess it's a camp counselor. I'm not sure who it is, but he's driving a boat, and I guess his girlfriend or some.
There's just teenagers.
They're just teenagers on a boat, and the girl that's with him is like, "Oh, I really want to drive the boat," and he's like, "Oh, you can't. I'm going to get in trouble." And she talks him into it, and then she just runs over, like, turn the wheel, like I don't, or I don't know what's going on there.
Well, and then of course they go to turn the wheel, and then they accidentally push the accelerator, and so then
right. Have you ever operated a boat before, Kim?
It was a long time ago. Yes.
I'm like, it's really hard to purposely run over somebody. Like, I mean, if you're, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like they didn't. I clearly she didn't know what she was doing, but I'm like, literally turn the wheel or just pull back on the throttle a little bit. And none of that would have happened. But of course, you got to set up the plot for the story. I mean,
yes. And so dad is dead, and we see a struggling child and then a life jacket. So one of the kids is dead and one of the kids is struggling. So then when you cut to the current, and you see the girl, you're like, oh, the daughter survived and came to live with her cousin and her aunt.
Yeah, and her aunt is super bizarre and weird. Like from the beginning.
I looked her up because I was like, she's so weird. Like I'm gonna say something, and maybe I was like, is that a drag queen? I kept looking at her hands, and her hands looked massive. And I was like, those look like man hands. And I'm like, maybe this was a
Seinfeld reference.
Maybe this was a choice. So I looked it up. No, it's a woman.
Okay. Well, and it was like, just like her, and I mean, this was her character, right? I mean, there was a purpose behind that, but like just the way she delivered her lines and the way she spoke, it was just very like, I don't know, like kind of like a fall 1950s, like perfect parent overseeing everything type of thing.
I do think that they kind of established, and because she has that one line about don't tell anybody that I filled out your permission slips because we wouldn't want to get in trouble, even though I'm a doctor, like I shouldn't be the one doing that. So it is setting up that like she does some malpractice type stuff that we're gonna find a lot out about later.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the ending. I think there's a couple of ways to sort of approach that, and it's funny now having watched it and just read about different people's reactions to the ending, just what the different responses to that look like. So, anyway, so basically, Angela shows up at this camp, and it's her cousin that's with her, and she basically doesn't speak. Like she's just sort of silent the whole time. And everybody's bullying her because of this. Like, why don't you talk? Why don't you do any activities? Why don't you do this and that? Which, like, I totally get if you're at a camp, a counselor's probably going to say, hey, like, why don't you go play dodgeball? Or, like, get the kid involved with something. But, like, these kids are just badgering this poor person nonstop. So
Yeah.
I don't know, Kim, what do you think about that? I mean,
I just like, I guess I have experiences where I'm like, yeah. There's the weird kid, and
right.
people are gonna all target that person. Like,
Yeah. So again, maybe that's part of the commentary of the film, like that they, just want to draw attention to the fact that that's a reality in
I
some
don't think
cases.
they were thinking that
Maybe
much
that's giving it.
about
I was
it.
gonna say maybe it's giving it too much credit. Like, and I've
Well,
seen
and to give it some justification, the girl, I forget her name, but the pretty popular
right,
girl who ends up dying. She really targets Angela after the boy that she likes starts giving attention to Angela, which is
right.
fair, not fair, but I mean justified, motivated.
That's
Like
fair. Yeah.
it's not just like she's a weirdo. And like to be fair, Angela like stares at this girl at times, just like
Yeah.
stares at her. So
Right.
like it's not like she's easy to ignore all the time. Basically,
Yeah.
she brought it on herself. Okay, Angela brought it all on herself.
Well, and I mean, the way they frame everything, clearly they're wanting you to feel sympathetic to Angela, all while clearly, frequently insinuating that she's the one killing people or somehow involved with that.
And it's interesting because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like in 1983, did people think it was her? We now, having years of horror experience, are like, but like, did people know then, or were they been like, no way, it's not that shy little girl? Like, that's what I don't know. I don't know what people.
Well, and I wonder if the intention were to make the audience think it was someone else. I wonder who they were trying to make you think it would have been. Like, who else in the cast, or
But do
what
we
other
think it really was supposed to be Ricky because he was so defensive of her and wanted to protect her?
Yeah,
and he also had interactions with all the people that died in his attempts to defend her.
that's true.
So I do think there is, who could it be? But yeah.
So okay, help me out, Cam. So okay, I'm just trying to I don't want to go through the entire plot. I know that's not sort of the goal, but like just other notable deaths and
So basically that's what starts happening, right? The cook dies, and then I think after that it's the boy in the canoe.
Right, because it gets flipped over and he's like under it, in the little air pocket.
And there's a little moment where he says, like, what are you doing here? Like, so you're like, there's recognition. He knows this person. Like, okay. And then after that, I think it's the boy with the bees in the bathroom. He gets
right, and that was a pretty gruesome sort of like panning shot, like when he was dead, like his arms on the ground and he's laying there and you see the bees kind of crawling all over
I
him.
like that death a lot. I do. I think all of them are inventive, but
and I was telling you and Jenny about this yesterday. As someone who just got stung by a wasp like 2 or 3 times and it did not feel awesome. This happened before. Like, I have a new appreciation for the bee thing. that was not great.
Yeah. So and then at that point they're like, okay, like the leadership is kind of like, okay, something's going on. We don't know what it is, but we have 3 dead people. We should be concerned here.
Well, and I will say this is totally kind of an aside to all of that, but like thinking about the people in leadership positions, like it just is such a microcosm of like the early 80s, the clothing, like the cutoff shirt for the guys, this like and then the shorts that are basically like
underwear.
Yeah, underwear essentially. Like it's just hysterical,
Yes. There is one shot, it's one of my favorite shots, and I feel like I've talked about it or somebody talked about it before. It's when I think the old leader guy, the guy who's in charge, Mel, I think he's talking to Ricky. And if you look in the back, you just see Ronnie lifting weights in the back. He's just back there.
The guy. So was he the one that was trying to talk to the police officer that showed up and he kept getting interrupted? And
I think so. Ronnie's the one who defends Angela as well. He's one of the counselors. Him and Susie are the counselors that sympathize with her and want to help her. Because if you're a counselor who doesn't like Angela and is mean to her or throws her in a lake, you're going to get a knife stabbed in your back through a shower stall.
That was a pretty gnarly scene too. I mean, just like imagining what that probably felt like, which would not have been awesome at all. So
and the strength that it would take to impale a stall and a back, and she'd have to have her back right against whatever. I'm not trying to.
I mean, the logistics of it don't fully pan out, but honestly, I will say it's actually a little bit better in Scream 2 when the guy's listening to the bathroom stall and gets the knife through the cheek because his ear is against it. So at least then it's like it kind of makes sense in that scene, you know.
Yes.
But
well,
anyway.
And then I like after that, Mel, the old man who was going to go out on a date with this young thing, apparently, was like, oh, he didn't take it back at me. I know it's him now. And then like goes and beats him to death. We don't even know.
Was that the scene where he basically catches him in the woods and is like shaking him and just basically abusing him? Like, you know.
And he really believes he's beaten Ricky to death. And which we never find out, did he? Or like, because we don't see him again. The movie just kind of ends very shortly after that. But then he runs through the archery range. No, not you. And I feel like that was the moment they wanted the audience to go, oh, it's not Ricky. Who is it?
So I know this is jumping all over the place, but like, I don't know. Should we talk about the ending or should we wait a little bit longer before we get to that point?
So we also have some chopped up kids in the woods. Which to me...
Oh, that's right, because they were doing like a little mini camping trip from the camp or something.
Yeah, did they splash her? I can't remember. I was trying to think, like, what did the kids ever do to her? And I really can't remember. Maybe they splashed her.
Splashed her when she was
when she got thrown in the lake.
Okay, yeah. I do remember that scene. Because that's one of the few times where she's like super vocal, you know, put me down, blah, 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 all that. So yeah, those kids are camping and get murdered.
And then the girl gets killed with a curling iron shoved in her area. I assume is what happened. I know that could kill you. I don't want to find out, but that's disturbing. And I do feel like as far as like horror, like because you just see like the shadow of it really, and her hands go up, and there's like this scream hiss that comes out like. That was disturbing. That was a disturbing
I mean,
moment.
And I think that's the sign of a good director recognizing limitations, right? Like, and just figuring out like there's certain things I'm not going to be able to show, or you know what I mean? And just trying to figure out like, how do I do that by implication and not direct, you know, a direct field of view of the horrible things that are happening. So
that scene I think is really
that was the scene where she like. So basically, it was dark in the cabin room, and she opens the door, and she's just
and
like
we
standing
see
there.
A figure that could be Ricky, could be Angela. We don't know. It looks very androgynous,
right?
And then, and she can't tell. She's like, "Who is that? Just shut the door. We're gonna get caught. Have to go to the stupid social."
So let me ask you this, and I mean, I hesitate to use the word good, but do you feel like the acting was good in this movie or not?
I feel like the acting was appropriate for this movie.
That is a perfect response. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's
with the way it was written. I don't think they could have done any better of a job.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So now the whole time with Angela, there's this other kid who has shown interest in her, a blonde kid, and I can't remember his name.
Oh my God, is it not Pete? Is it Peter? No.
I don't know.
Paul. It's Paul. It's Paul.
Paul. You named all the apostles there. You're getting there. It was Matt. It was who? Like
I knew it started with a P. It's Paul. Yeah. Yes. Ricky's friend has shown some interest in Angela.
Okay. So yeah, like he and you know, he's a little too assertive at times. Yes. Like, you know, he like kisses her and is like, hey, can I have another kiss? Like it's just a little like okay,
well, and then he starts getting a little handsy, and you're like, why doesn't she want that? Oh, well, she's just shy. Well, there's another reason that she doesn't want him to get too handsy, which we're gonna find out.
Yeah. So do you want to? What else am I missing before we get to the
Paul's death? So basically,
I mean, that's part of the conclusion, right?
It is, yeah. So Angela and Paul get into a fight because you know Angela's such a prude that he ends up kissing the other girl, and Angela sees.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And then he's so apologetic. You have to believe me. You have to. I'm sorry. You have to forgive me. And she's all like, well, meet me at the beach. And he's like, okay. And so as the massacre is unfolding, we basically get to this like climax of like dead bodies, and they clearly know something's wrong. Get everybody together. We got to get out of here. Stay in pairs. The counselors that have been good to her,
Right.
show up on the beach and see a naked person humming a little song, see Paul's head in the naked person's lap.
Separated from his
Not
body.
yet. Well, then she turns around and Paul's head is not on his body.
Right.
And Angela is naked. She's got a whole lot of blood on her.
Yeah. And she's got, before we get to the thing, she's like standing there like this, like, it's just like the most,
she's
like,
got this very demonic, which is where my trauma comes from. I'll share in just a second. Yes.
Yeah.
She's like straight up demonic, like this hissing, this whatever. And they're like, oh my God. And then we go from close up to wide shot. And Angela is a boy.
Yeah, it's like full frontal nudity
at
the end of the thing. Like,
and
I was telling,
before that, they have they cut to when she's a kid, or when there's a kid being brought to the house, and you find out the aunt's like, oh, you're going to come stay with us. And you're like, oh, it's the kid who survived the crash. And then we can't have another little boy. That won't do. Well, we have to have a little girl. And so you're like, oh, so she raised this boy as a girl. And
there's like a bandage on the head. So it's like they had this kid lobotomized or something. Like,
I assumed that was a wound from the accident.
Okay. Maybe that's what yeah.
I fully believe that Angela knows she was born a boy and her aunt basically raised her as a girl. Like,
okay. Yeah.
And that would cause anyone.
In the way that. So I guess my question was going to be, I guess, a couple of things. So the first is, do you think the ending is too fast? Like, do you think it needed more resolution, or do you think it's so shocking that it's like, yes, like, this is it. We're done. Like,
what do you do after that?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
I think anything after that, it would have been like, it would have just been so like, what is she going to do? Like,
this is something that, like, we talk about when it comes to writing. Like, once you hit the resolution and like you've hit that kind of high point of the story, if you want to call it that, you just end it, right? Because there's not really much of a point to anything.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot about with writing, and something I very much appreciated about your Sasquatch story is that I felt like you didn't linger in these moments. Like, we only saw what we needed to see, and we didn't like get all this extra, which I struggle with as a writer.
Well, thank you for that and all of your notes. So the total other context here, I've got a little novella I've been working on. I'm going to put it out there in the world sometime soon. And Kim was gracious enough to go through the entire thing and provide copious proofreading notes, which I very much appreciate. So,
my jam.
But anyway, so the ending of this. So, like, have you gone to anywhere like Rotten Tomatoes and looked at the reviews of the movie or anything? So it's like it's 60-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is honestly infinitely higher than I was expecting to see when I went over there to see it. But pretty much every critic, and I'll qualify all this by saying too that, a critic's response to something does not measure its worth. Like, I mean, I love a lot of movies that critics hate, so like that doesn't mean anything. But
like High School Musical,
what's that?
Like High School Musical, it's like.
And I haven't seen that. Am I shunned because I haven't seen that?
No, you're probably better off for it, but that's
okay.
Fine.
Well, but everybody's response was basically like the ending makes the movie. They're like, even though so most people said it's not a great movie, but the ending is worth the price of admission. And it's not like it's a long movie. It's like an hour and a half, maybe, something like that. So would you agree with that? Would you say the ending is what makes it what it is? Or
I would, because like we were saying earlier, like if they were trying to capitalize on this whole like murder at camp thing, you have to do it different. You have to make it unique. I guess if the end ended up, even if Paul was still decapitated and it was just Angela who had been killing all these people who like harmed her, like, okay, so it was just a revenge story type thing.
Yeah.
I would wager it would never have reached the cult classic status that it has. Because that ending, you're like, what? But like, it also makes a lot of sense. Like, I know that it is out of left field, but if you watch the movie again, like that's why she doesn't shower with the rest of the other girls. And they make a comment about that at one point.
Right.
Like, so there are little moments where it's not like you weren't sort of being prepared for this.
Right.
Like,
the interesting thing about this, and I'm curious about your take on this. Like, if this movie were released today, Like it
No,
was made today.
no.
What I'm just curious, like, what do you think the response to this movie would be?
Cancel.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
So,
Because
yeah,
it would, I think today they would see it as a commentary on transgender
I was
people.
about to say, I'd see
Yeah.
it. I think people would see it as like a transphobic.
Yes, like,
Film.
oh,
Like,
you're saying that trans people are villains and la la la,
which is interesting because then some people that I've seen commenting on this are saying that a lot of transgender people have adopted this as like a trans revenge tale of like,
and it very well could be. That's why, like, when I say it doesn't come totally out of left field. Like, this is a person that was forced to live in a body they didn't choose to live in,
yeah,
and be put in environments they don't want to be put in. And so this is what's going to happen if you
yeah.
force somebody to
You're going to
live
turn
like that.
demonic and decapitate people. Like
Exactly.
that's
So
the yeah.
I'm all about reclaim and make it your revenge victory movie.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. I don't know. I don't think that it was any attempt at commentary on that lifestyle in 83.
I agree.
I just think they wanted the shock factor of it.
Well, when I saw those responses to it, I think, and I'm glad people were able to take a movie like this and use it for that purpose or adopt it for that purpose. But like, I think that's giving the filmmakers way too much credit.
Yes,
I think it's just meant to be shocking. Like,
Yes, it's meant to be shocking. And again, and to defend it in that way, it's not a person who chose this. It was done to them. Like, even if it was made today, I don't think Angela would identify as a transgender person. Her aunt forced her to live that way. And that's what it is ultimately about in that sense.
Now, I will say, having watched it, I am glad that I've seen it. Like, it does feel like one of those little like horror gems that kind of represents its time period well. And like, one of those things that honestly, I probably would not have sought out if you hadn't mentioned it and said like, oh yeah, you definitely need to watch this, So I'm glad that I've watched it. Now, do you think that any of the sequels are worthwhile or not really?
No.
Like, okay. Because I saw there's like a lot of them. Like, I didn't realize how many there were, but yeah.
And like the one I remember watching, it has Angela. And she's very self-aware as a killer. Like, he goes to kill people.
So is it the same actress in it?
I genuinely don't remember. I don't remember if it's the same actress. So the reason this movie has stayed with me for most of my life is because I think I told you I saw this probably when I was like 12.
Okay.
I know we were in our new house, so I had to have been older than 10, but probably not much older. And my younger sisters were also watching the movie. So it was on VHS.
So how old would they have been at that point?
They would have been like 2 and 4 years younger than me. So like 10 and 8. So
we're too young to watch it. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure we had rented it from Blockbuster. We had the VHS. And so we're watching it. I don't remember like any scenes except for that final scene, because what happened is that final scene happens. She's got that demonic face and it fades into that like bluish green hue, and then it freezes.
Like a negative kind of color.
Yeah. And my sisters and I freaked out because it was scary.
So are we talking like screaming, panic, that kind of stuff?
Like we were scared. So my mother rewound it and kept playing it over and over while we sat there like very stop it, Mom, stop it. But like,
was she doing that just because it was funny?
Yeah, I remember like she was enjoying that we were so scared of this image. And it is very much one of those movies that I had to watch again as an adult to like move past that trauma. Like, now I can watch that final shot and be like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny how different parents are. Like, my mom, if I had watched something like this when I was 12, she would freak out. Like, I mean, like, that would have been not
I don't
good.
know if I've ever told you this, but, and I'm writing a lot about this in my own personal writing, but like, for my 6th grade birthday party, I rented The Faculty.
Which is awesome. I love that movie. Yeah.
My favorite movie. And so a bunch of 6th grade girls were in the basement watching The Faculty. And the very first scene where she gets the pencil stabbed through her hand, my friend Jen and I were like, yes, awesome. Every other girl ran upstairs screaming, and I had to turn it off. And we couldn't watch the rest of the movie, and I had to wait till everybody left the next day to watch it.
Maybe this is just me being like, having seen so many horror movies, but I'm like, the faculty is a pretty tame horror movie, really.
Yes.
It's very like teen pop. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's funny.
But I don't know. I guess other sixth grader. I don't know. Whatever.
I was about to say, and if you've never seen like a horror movie before, like I could see how it would be, a little much.
And because they show, it's not like, oh, oops, it's like right through that hand. So, yes.
Yeah. And actually, I think I told you Jonah watched his first rated R movie the other night. Did I tell you that?
I don't know.
It was The Matrix. I may have told you that.
Well, you told me you watched The Matrix. I didn't know that was rated R.
Yeah. And to me, it honestly could be a PG-13 movie.
Yeah. Like, why is it rated R?
I think just because there are some scenes where you see people getting like shot in like full view, that kind of thing. But like, I don't know, like there's not really much like cursing or anything. There's no sex or anything like that. It's like, I don't know.
Okay,
but anyway.
I was shocked to find out that it is rated R.
He really liked it a lot. And I was he was at the end of it, me and Erica were like, can you summarize the plot? Because, it's a kind of complicated movie, and he's like, oh yeah, like basically machines are enslaving people to turn them into batteries. It's like, okay, yeah, like you got it. So that's it. Like, yeah. Yep. So, but anyway, Sleepaway Camp. Like, so I guess the question is, would we generally recommend this for people to watch? Or,
I would. Yeah. If you're a horror fan and you've not seen Sleepaway Camp, then I do not feel like you can call yourself a horror movie fan. Like, you have to, I personally feel like it needs to be in your movie repertoire, whether you like it or not. I don't care, but it has to be there. I think you have to have seen it.
I think it's very much like make a little bit of popcorn, sit down one night, spend an hour and a half with this campy little slice of history, and just see what you think about it. Like, that's kind of
again, like, I love those death scenes.
Yeah.
The
death scene, I will say you are totally right about. And actually, the more I think about like 80s horror, even Friday the 13th, stuff like that, these are a little bit more distinctive. And I don't know if it's because they're more like colorful. Like, there's just something about the way that they kind of set the scenes up and the payoff of them that's a little bit more like, not necessarily overly graphic, but
many of them in innocuous situations. Like in Friday the 13th, there's that scene where the teenagers, Kevin Bacon, are hooking up on a bed. Well, anytime you're going to be hooking up, you're putting yourself in a quote unquote dangerous situation because you're breaking one of the rules. So of course someone's going to come stab a knife through your neck when you're done. But in Sleepaway Camp, you're making dinner for campers. You're going canoeing with a girl. You're going to the bathroom. You're curling your hair. These are all very simple, innocuous tasks that kill people in this movie.
Yeah. So I'm not going to watch any of the sequels unless I get a recommendation for somebody to do that. But yeah, I think it's worth checking out. But what I will say, and I assume you're not watching this video unless you enjoy horror films to some extent. Like, if you don't like horror, then I wouldn't recommend watching it. But like,
and it's not a scary movie. Like,
no, it's not.
No jump scares. It's not like,
honestly, like, I laughed at maybe 90% of the movie, like, because it's just so over the top. Frequently.
Like, you will see those outfits and go, oh my God.
Yeah.
That. Actually, a lot of that's coming back. So
yeah, it is, interestingly. So yeah.
I literally looked at one of the girls' outfits in the movie and I was like, oh, that's cute. I like that.
What did they say? Fashion is like in a cycle, or it comes in cycles or whatever, but like, I don't know, cyclical, that's what I'm looking for. So what are we watching next, Kim? I can't remember if we've already talked about something or not. What about the Black Demon? The Black Demon, that shark movie.
I know nothing about that. I feel like I just saw a clip of it somewhere, but I still don't know that it's come out. But the Meg 2 has to be coming out soon.
The Meg 2 is coming out soon, and I think we absolutely should watch and review that for sure. But if we want to squeeze the Black Demon in, it is on streaming now, but you have to rent it. Like, it's not, but you have to rent it. Now, I will say, again, it does not measure the worth of a movie. All the reviews I've seen have been like, it's terrible. But I still any kind of like shark horror film, like, I'm gonna watch, like, basically. So okay. So maybe the Black Demon, maybe we'll do that one like in the next few weeks or something.
Yeah, because I'll pay to watch that one at least. I would have paid to go see it in a theater if it was in theaters.
And I think it's like, $2 or $3 to rent it, so it's not like a big deal. So cool. Okay, any parting words of wisdom?
I will say that one of the lines from the movie, I was actually going to write it on my whiteboard and then I didn't, is I would wonder if it's one of the more famous lines from the movie, where they are describing Angela as she's every carpenter's dream, flat as a board and needs a screw. that became a household insult.
That when I heard that line in the movie, I was like, the writing here is not like tremendous or anything, but that is a pretty well crafted insult.
Yeah, that was an insult that made its way around my house growing up. So yes, yes.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll watch the Black Demon, presumably, definitely the Meg, but hopefully the Black Demon soon. And we'll be back shortly.
Hopefully, yes.